Hi, I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful flower card. I'm going to be using the M.I.S.T.I stamp wide stripes background, and I'm showing you here where the edge of the stamp is a little bit off, and so I'm going to show you the workaround to make sure that you stamp straight onto your card base. I'm just placing the stamp in the corner on the bottom left hand corner. And I'm also noticing that the stamp is not so thick, and so I'm putting a good layer of graph paper for the base. And I also will need to stamp on the graph paper so that I can center my cardstock to get a straight image on my card base. I'm just inking up my stamp with Simon Says Stamp Sea Glass. And with these solid stamps like this, I just try to be careful to ink them up really good so I could see where I need to place my cardstock. And I know that it looks like I'm pushing really hard, but I'm really not. It's just that my hands are so, veiny and scrawny looking, so it just looks like I'm struggling, but I'm really not. I'm just taking some post-it tape and I'm just masking off right at the seam of the crease. And what I'm doing is I'm using the image on the graph paper to center the design on my cardstock. And I'm staying away from the edge because sometimes it's a little harder to push down in that bottom corner, and so this is just going to make it easy on myself. I mean, you can still stamp there if you want, but it's easier for me so that I could tape my cardstock to the graph paper with the post-it. And I'm inking up only 4 of the bars on the wide stripes, simply because I don't need to waste ink on that other one. It's not going to show up on the card, and so I'm inking it up a lot because it is a solid stamp, and I want to make sure that I have good coverage and that I don't have ink pad line on the image. And also because I'm taking so much time inking it, I want to make sure that the ink doesn't pool up on the stamp. So I'm just closing the lid. And I'm just pushing down, following the stamp, just to make sure it's got a good impression. You could also tell by looking at the stamp once you've opened the lid if there's any residual ink left on the stamp, then you know that it didn't touch the paper, and so you don't have ink on that part of the paper. So if you close your lid, you could just get that ink onto your cardstock and you know where to push. I'm going to be using a Close to My Heart stamp set, and it's called Lovely Blooms. And the first time I used this stamp, I just was so frustrated because I couldn't get the solid part to line up with the outline part. And then I took a look in the catalog, and it won't match. It's just supposed to kind of look a little watercolory. And so the best way for me to try to line it up is to look at the image on the clear backing, because they are printed to coordinate that way, and that way I'm not struggling with which way to turn the solid stamp. So I'm picking up my image with the lid again, and I'm checking to make sure. I just picked up the unit, and you can kind of see whether it clears the lid or not, on whether you need more of a shim with your graph paper, but I don't. And I'm going to be using some strawberry slush paper from Stamping Up. And I'm going to be showing you how to stamp multiples, but I'm not going to show you multiple cards today. So I'm just inking up the stamp with the Strawberry Slush ink pad from Stamping Up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that piece of cardstock and I'm just going to trim it down a little bit so that I could rotate my cardstock and stamp multiples. So I've trimmed it down to 5 inches and I've just rotated the image. And by doing it this way, you don't get confused. Like if you have a little square, you don't get confused on which way your image is supposed to be when you stamp the solid part. And always make sure that your corner is tucked into the bottom. And so here I'm using the image on the clear backing to make sure that I have the correct position for the solid stamp. It's not really a solid stamp. It's more of like a meshy kind of image. And I've tried using the Strawberry Slush ink to ink this part just so that it's all the same ink, but for some reason that ink pools on the stamp and then you get these weird impressions. And so I'm just trying to wipe off the lint there. And I found that using pure poppy worked really well with this image, and it didn't pull up, and it was dark enough. It was a little bit, it doesn't, it's hard to explain. It doesn't stamp as dark as it normally does because of the type of image it is. And so I've just rotated my cardstock all the way around, and I'm noticing that I want the image to be a little darker, so I'm doing a second stamp of color. And so it just darkens it up. Now I'm going to be doing the same thing with the smaller flower. And I've cut a lot of this part out. There's no point in having to show you the same thing and bore you with that. So I'm just showing you that I'm using a smaller piece and using the same colors again, the Strawberry Slush. And then I repeat with the leaves. And for the leaves, I'm using Stampin' Up! Pear Pizzazz with the Simply Chartreuse ink. And I tried stamping the solid part with a darker ink like I did for the flower, but it didn't turn out as nice, and so I went back to the Simply Chartreuse. And this stamp was a little hard to line up because it was so dark that I couldn't really see through it, so I did the best I could, and I was off by just a little bit, and then I just moved the stamp on the press, on the lid. And so you see that first stamp above there is the ripe avocado, and I ended up going back to the Simply Chartreuse. And now I'm using the wide stripes sayings, I think that's what it's called, from Simon Says Stamp. And I need to figure out where I want it to sit. And I know I want it to sit on one of the stripes, but I don't know how far over my flowers will go, so I'm just going to try to position them the best that I can. And I'm thinking that's about where I want it, so I know that my stamp will sit about there. So I'm just moving all the pieces out. And sorry I didn't show you the fussy cutting. I just didn't want to bore you with that. And I also didn't have enough time. So I'm just picking up my stamp with the press, and I am stamping it the long way, and that's just because I want that corner to rest my cardstock in. You could fold your card and crease it and then put it in the corner, but I just thought this would be faster. And here I'm going back to adhere my flowers, my pieces onto my card, and I'm using some foam tape to just give some dimension to these flowers. And on the leaves, I only put adhesive. I just use my ATG gun on the bottom that gets tucked into the flowers, and then I put a little piece of foam under the tip of the leaf just to give it a little bit of dimension. And I'm sorry I'm a little out of frame there, but I'm just putting the adhesive on that bottom tip. And I'm just cutting my foam squares just so that it's a small piece. I like using the foam strips, the foam roll, simply because it makes it easier for mailing, and it's not as bulky. And I've adhered the other two flowers on there, and I'm debating on whether I want to overlap it or to tuck it under, and I decide to tuck it under. So I only need to put foam on one side. I just need to pull it up just a little bit so I can get that flower underneath. And I'm going to round the corner, and I'm using the We Are Memory Keepers corner chomper, and I'm using the 1/2 inch, and I'm just grabbing my jelly roll pen, and I like to use the Sakura jelly roll medium tip. I just really like the way it writes. And I cut out the part where I painstakingly tried to figure out where to put my sequins, so I am just adhering them down with the matte multi-medium, and that way if any seeps out, it'll be matte, it won't be shiny. But it's from Claudine Helmuth Studio, and it is the multimedia matte. And thanks for watching.